Hello, and welcome to another episode of Vacation Rental Blueprint. I'm your host, Tim, and joining me as always, TC. TC, we're going to kind of run through our introduction today because we have a big episode. But first, I wanted to check in. I think last time we talked, you had some hail at your properties out in Colorado. And I think the listeners are probably also wondering, how's it going with that? What's going on with that? Have you had more hail? Because the weather has been insane out there.
Yeah, so I think what we shared with our listeners last time is just, Google search Red Rocks and hail, and you will see some amazing footage. And several of the houses that we work with were right across the street from Red Rocks. Very popular location because of its proximity to the concerts and the mountains. And 2 consecutive days of hail. And then to the south of Red Rocks, there was a tornado that touched down and ran about 6 miles. So lots of damage. And I think the key learning for me that might be worth listening to for our listeners is this comes back to having great partners. So we have a great partner in a roofer. We have a great partner in a landscaping company. We have a great partner in an HVAC company. And when we saw the forecast, we were on the phone with all three of these saying, hey, be aware that we're going to want you to come out and do some inspections. And people don't always think about the HVAC system, but in one of the properties, the outdoor unit was absolutely destroyed. So, we had roofers, we had contractors for HVAC, landscapers, all doing inspections after the second day of hail. We were first on the list because of the partnership we have with these folks and that we were somewhat proactive. And they came out and it's been submitted to insurance. Insurance has already been out with their adjusters and the process is moving forward. So key takeaways and key learnings for me. Number one, have the right insurance, have great insurance, have good coverage, and have a great set of partners that you can rely on. And then finally, I guess, be proactive. Don't wait until there's 1,000 people making phone calls to these providers, these service providers. Be first, be proactive. And yeah, it's going to take some time to recover, but we shall recover. And guess what? In the forecast this Thursday and Friday, there's hail yet again.
There we
So
go.
I've already reached out to these vendors to find out what the heck do you do when you've already got a claim in and you have 2 more days of devastating hail. So more to follow. We'll keep this story alive for our listeners.
It's just crazy. I think of having been to Red Rocks many times, and I've heard, in some of the news reports, the concert goers who were there, and the fact that they were having the concert when this storm rolled in just tells you how fast moving something like this was. Because it's not like Red Rocks is out there just saying come hell or high water, we're going to have this concert, right? I mean, and just how quickly it rolled in. I've heard some reports talking about some of the concert goers were saying, they were disappointed that Red Rocks needs to do more to protect from those instances. And I'm thinking to myself, having been to Red Rocks, it's beautiful. It is sort of one of those kind of once in a lifetime concert experiences, but it's cut into a cavern. And so I was like, well, it'd be interesting to see what steps they take to protect from these types of events in the future. Because you are wide open in a cut into the side of a mountain watching a concert, right?
Well, there was one concert attendee that was interviewed after the fact, and they went and sat in their car, but the hail was golf ball and baseball size, so they got glass shattered all over them and had to go to the hospital for that. So there's no hiding out there. And if you watch the storm develop, it wasn't forecasted. It really came out of the blue. I guess, in retrospect and probably leading into today's conversation, the one thing that I wish I would have done, and I certainly will in the future, is I thought of the property, I thought of the damage. What I should have done and what I will do in the future is just as a courtesy, reach out to the guests and say, hey, be aware. We're tracking this on radar. We're seeing some storms. If you're home, just kind of go downstairs, be safe, but just give them some sort of an alert. And, it's more top of mind today than ever. And I think our listeners will understand why as we get into this conversation.
And that is really the perfect segue into today's episode, because today is really a special treat for our listeners. We're continuing from our first season, our partner profile series. And today I'm thrilled to welcome the director of safety programs at Breezeway, Justin Ford. Breezeway is a leader in property operations and safety. And today we're going to be doing a deep dive into kind of innovative and, in my opinion, Justin will chime in, but really should be required mandatory safety programs if you're going to operate a short-term rental. So whether you're a seasoned property manager or just starting out in the industry, I think this episode is going to be essential for you to listen to and packed with insights that you don't want to miss. So, Justin, I hope I did a good intro there for Breezeway, but I'd love to get your kind of introduction to Breezeway and just your role and how you got started.
Hey, thank you very much, Tim and TC, for having me on. I really appreciate it. I've been in the vacation rental industry for 25 years, and I kind of got started with my own little home in Maine on a lake and turned that into the largest vacation rental agency in New England. At one time, we managed as many as 600 properties, had a boat rental company, had a real estate company, did weddings and events. And my way of giving back to my community, I didn't want to join the school board because, that wasn't my thing. I didn't want to run for office. I didn't want to be a select board member. But one day I was having an outdoor fire at my house, and I didn't get the appropriate permit. And the fire chief in my town, he was a friendly guy. He said, I got a great way for you to learn more about fire regulations. Come on down to the fire department Thursday night and I'll show you. So I did. And it turned out that was the first night of training and me becoming a firefighter for the next 15 years. So between that, my service in the U.S. Coast Guard, I think I've kind of established that I know what I'm talking about when it comes to short-term rentals, 25 years in the industry. 15 years as a firefighter and 4 years doing boating safety and focus on that.
Quick question for you. So having been in the short-term rental industry now for a while with properties and helping other short-term rental owners, it's interesting that when most of us think about furnishing and preparing a short-term rental, we're thinking about all the stuff. Cram as many beds into the house as you can. The more beds equals heads equals dollars. And all of these perks, all of these things like, hey, we've got cribs, we've got high chairs, we've got all this stuff. So could you go into a little detail about kind of your insight into short-term rental and how that mindset might need to be adjusted from all the stuff to safety is the most important thing we as owners provide to our guests?
Yeah, it's so easy to compare the short-term rental industry to so many other things, and I hear it all the time. A good friend of mine, Dave Krause at Rent Responsibly, likes to talk about it in comparison to the Model T, and I think that's a good example. I mean, when cars first came out, there weren't any requirements for seatbelts. You didn't have to have your headlights on and reduce visibility. You didn't have to have anti-lock brakes. You didn't have to have airbags. I mean, you just did what you did. And as people started using more and more cars, all of a sudden people said, wait a minute, we got to slow these guys down. And wait a minute, they should probably have a seatbelt on so they don't get killed. That is the vacation rental industry, the short-term rental industry to a T. It's been around a long time, but it wasn't until around 2010 that all of a sudden it blew up. And you could throw a couple of bikes out in your garage. You didn't have to buy a smoke alarm. You didn't have to do anything. And lo and behold, look at all these safety incidents that are happening. We've gone from 1 in 30 Americans staying in a vacation rental in 2010 to 1 in 5 this year. And by 2028, 1 in 3. This is the general public using our product. And everything else we know about the general public using anything, trains, planes, cruise ships, bad things happen. And so we've got to completely change our mindset and understand that regulations are coming, and the winners will be the ones that are addressing safety and have put safety at the top before they're required to do it.
So yeah, and I think that's the important, Justin, you made a great point there is, as business owners operating in an industry full of, hundreds of thousands of other business owners, and if there's a safety issue with one that makes the news, that impacts everyone's business. And that's the reality of, I'm sure your job is to read these stories, these horrible stories and these challenging stories where safety failed at a property. But you're not the only one reading it, right? I mean, there's people that read that and they think, well, I'm not, I didn't even think about that. I'm going back to a hotel because, I mean, we could tell. I'm sure you could tell stories for 4 hours straight just of these horror safety incidents you've read about. But we are really beholden to each other on the success and the impact of safety that each of us puts in place in our property.
The problem with short-term rentals is that there's not a lot of code that applies to them. Building codes are either for residential or commercial. And as we know, vacation rentals kind of fall in between. I believe it's more commercial than residential. But people just didn't have a guidance on what to do. So when we developed this course, we took everything that we knew was going wrong in the industry, everything that applied both from the insurance companies, and I know you had Proper Insurance on before. They guided us a lot with their claims data. And then we took all this building code data and we took a look and said, what's going on? The perception that most people have is that people are dying from fire or carbon monoxide incidents, things that relate to fire. And why is that? Because in our communities, generally speaking, if there is a short-term rental safety program or your city requires it, it's the fire inspector or the fire chief that comes out. But the reality is that's only 3% of incidents that come in as insurance claims. 83% of incidents are slips, trips, and falls. That's the number one reason that people are getting injured in these vacation rentals. And that's not really something that a city inspection program looks at. A fire chief's not going to come into your house and go, wow, that carpet's a trip hazard. And boy, if you put a light there, people would be able to see better and not trip. In Lake Tahoe, 7 years old, checked into a vacation rental recently. And the big news story was that he found a gun in the master bedroom drawer, the third or fourth drawer down within 5 minutes of arrival. And so the whole news story was focused on, oh, wow, there was a gun. Well, guess what? 50% of travelers travel with a gun when they're staying in vacation rentals. Happens all the time. I talk to cleaners all the time who find them. It's not unusual. But it was a sheriff deputy, right, and he got busted for leaving his loaded gun behind. And horrors that this kid found it. That's not the message there. Everyone missed the message. The message there is within 5 minutes of arrival, a 7-year-old child was in the fourth dresser drawer down in the primary bedroom looking. And his dad was quoted in the news story as saying, kids are curious. Every time we go into these rentals, my kids explore everything. And I don't think people take into account the general public, people you don't know, you will never meet and may never see or hear from again, are walking in off the street to stay in your property, and we don't know what they're going to do.
Yeah, when I think about, a high quality cleaning company, and some short-term rental owners utilize a post-checkout inspector. Those are layers, but they're not an absolute, right? I mean, there's in some of these properties, they're 10 bedrooms, right? They're 10 bedrooms, a great room, a game room, a theater room. I've seen some of the theater rooms have 12 theater chairs that all have little cubbies all inside of them. I mean, it is for a kid, for the curious, it's a great scavenger hunt. And you can have the best cleaning company and you can have a amazing inspector, but yeah, in some cases, someone leaves their AirPods behind. Someone leaves, a teddy bear behind. But in other cases, you just don't know. You don't know what's being left behind. I've at this point in my career, I've opened 250 different businesses across service and hospitality. So hotels, restaurants, just the whole array. And as that business leader doing that, there is, like you said, the fire department comes out and inspects, right? They say, all right, Tim, you've got to add this and this and this. or you can't get your permit to open. For short-term rental, the first time I opened a short-term rental, I'm kind of like, all right, I think I'm good. And then I'm looking around going, wait, I don't think there's no checks and balance here. I can just start operating. Um, and for a lot of people, they're like, they don't even think about it. They're like, great, let's go. For me, I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is all on me. And I think our listeners may be here listening to our conversation today going, gosh, I don't know. I don't even know where to start. Here we have Justin, Tim, and TC, who combined probably have 100+ years of experience operating businesses, uh, safely, telling us, oh, you have to, run your business in a safe manner. I think I told you offline, our number one job when I was in like the restaurant hotel space was, don't kill anyone. That is, I mean, when you think about a restaurant, you're taking temperatures on your food, depending on your hours of operations, 3 to 8 times a day. We're not just doing that because we love thermometers and we love to see what temperature the food is at. Like, we understand the impact of foodborne illness, and we understand that, if a young child were to eat something that's not to temperature and contract a foodborne illness, it can kill them and it can change a family's life. There's that same responsibility in short-term rentals that, I want to hit home with our listeners to make sure they understand that is your responsibility running a business, is to provide a safe environment for people, to your point, to enjoy their vacation. But if I'm listening to this and either about to get into short-term rentals or currently operating a short-term rental that maybe I haven't done a safety assessment, I think that the resounding question is, what do I do? Like, what are the first steps I can do to right this ship and make sure I'm doing the right thing for my guests?
First thing you got to do is make sure that people don't die in the house. And that starts with fire safety. You have to accept that the smoke alarm is the single most important item in your rental property. If there isn't a TV, a bed, if you're just offering a container, if you don't know these fancy Airbnb containers that are being made now and turned into rentals, or a yurt, if the only thing that's in there is the floor, there's got to be a smoke alarm. There's got to be something that says, hey, you're going to spend about 40% of your time asleep in my dwelling. I'm going to make sure you get up and get out in the event of a fire. And that's where we failed people so many times in this industry. Most recently, the Montreal fire that just happened up there in Quebec. 7 people died because there was a fire. The fire alarms didn't work and they couldn't get out. I mean, someone's going to jail on that, and it's not good. And I think the second thing that comes along with that is you've got to understand that smoke alarms are like cars. There's not like just one smoke alarm. You go to Home Depot or Lowe's or True Value and you just grab a smoke alarm based on the price. No, don't do that. You've got to know what type of smoke alarms are made, what's the best for your property, how to install them, where to install them. And there's free information out there on how to do it. You can watch videos on YouTube if you don't want to go through the safety course, but you need to know that. And that's where it all starts.
Right. And there's an exercise that, we always talk about in the service and hospitality side, where, run the travel path in an emergency. Think through that travel path in an emergency. You have smoke alarms, bare minimum, and to your point, like that, without a question, if you have a floor, you got to have smoke alarms. But those smoke alarms go off and you've got a guest in your second floor bedroom furthest away from the stairs. How's that guest going to get out? What is the plan? What is the path? How does that guest get out? Okay, they hear the smoke alarm, but being that empathetic business operator, think through, okay, what is that guest thinking? They wake up middle of the night, they hear an alarm, they're scared to death. How do they know what to do? What will they do? What will they naturally do? And how can I help guide them out? That egress path. How do you create an environment that it's not, you've woken them up, but now what can you do to kind of help them get out and help them survive, really?
And we as humans have a huge problem with this, and we need to accept this. It's the if-when thing. There's certain things you could say, if a meteor ever hit me, what would happen? Well, in recorded human history, there's no reports of a meteor ever flying out of the sky and hitting a human being. It's
Right.
not happened that we know of. So that's an if. When there's over 250,000 structure fires in the United States, we need to assume that when a fire happens at my home, the statistics are there. It's a fact. At some point in time, maybe not next week, maybe not next month, maybe not for 20 years, but your house is going to catch on fire. And you don't know when that's going to be unless you're an arsonist. So when that happens has to be a mentality. And to your point, Tim, you've got to walk through these properties and go, all right, the fire's tonight. I've put all this clutter in front of this window. How are they going to get out? All right, the fire is tonight. The bunk bed is pushed up against the window, and I've got 5 kids coming to stay here because I approved 3 extra because they were so sweet. And so now I've got 5 kids in this room, and the parents are in a primary bedroom all the way up on the 3rd floor. And so when the fire happens tonight, how are these 5 little kids going to get out of this room on their own because their parents can't get to them? We need to go in with that approach and turn the lights out. Blindfold yourself, invite your best friend over, invite your aunt over, invite your sister over, and say, all right, I'm going to put you in the bedroom, turn the lights out, and scream fire, and you figure out how to get out of here. And if you can't do it while I'm here watching you, then I know my renters can't do it either, and I've got to come up with a solution.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. I was talking to an owner, we were in their house and we were actually talking about, the smoke alarms. This was a while ago. And, we were talking about fire extinguishers. And this was, it's fresh in my head because every business, you've got to not just have your fire extinguisher, but the fire department has to approve specifically where it goes on the wall. And then you've got to have the appropriate signage. And I'm like, well, do you have a fire extinguisher? Oh, yeah. Okay, where is it? Because I can't tell where it is. Oh, it's under the sink. And then so I open the sink and it's kind of pushed all the way to the back. And it's a question of, again, that's okay. You have a fire extinguisher. Step 1, done. But step 2 is, how do you make sure it's accessible to someone in an emergency when they need it? They're not going to accidentally start a grease fire in their kitchen and go, okay, well, let me open every cabinet calmly and see if I can find where this, oh, look, it's all the way back there. Okay, cool, fire out. And we're focusing on fire, but this is, it's multitude of levels and layers.
It's, there was a woman in Sanford, Florida who posted on one of these Facebook groups that are for owners of Airbnbs a few months ago. And she was complaining that the renter had a kitchen fire in her rental and did not put the fire out, and was just lambasting the renter for being this horrible person for starting a fire in her kitchen and not putting it out. Now it's done hundreds of thousands worth of dollars worth of damage. And then she says something that's key. She said there was a fire extinguisher there. It was in the pantry and they didn't access it. Now, I couldn't believe how many people just, followed through and went terrible renter. And then I came in and said, wait a minute, people. Look at the fire extinguisher. It's in the pantry past the stove. Do you think the renter wanted to walk through fire to go get the fire extinguisher? That homeowner didn't set that renter up for success. And I say it all the time. Stop putting those things under the sink. Take someone, again, you don't know. Startle them. I see these funny things on Instagram or TikTok where the people startle people and it's a funny laugh. But seriously, try that. Startle someone sometime and say, fire, get the fire extinguisher. They panic, they run 90% of the time. They're not going to turn around and run under the kitchen sink that's next to the stove, which is 1,200 degrees from the fire, and try and put out a fire in a property that doesn't even belong to them. They don't care. It's not their house.
Right.
And I tell this to homeowners all the time. The fire extinguisher is a tool that you give the renters to help you. Because if they can easily put out the fire because you put it on the wall, easily accessible, by an exit point where they can go, I'm out of here, but wait a minute, here's this device. I'll give it a shot. And they're successful, then you're not calling the renters next week. You're just calling the cleaner to come clean up the mess. So, yeah, but this all falls into the same line of general public. You got to use common sense. You've got to think about real life scenarios, not do something because your neighbor sticks theirs under the sink and that just seemed like a good idea.
This is a key topic. This is a key learning for me, Justin, when I took the course is, yeah, I was guilty. I had the fire extinguisher under the sink, and that's changing. So what am I doing based on what I learned in the course? Well, first of all, I'm going to make sure I have the right size fire extinguisher. There's a great demo video in the program that demonstrates the different sizes and how ineffective some of them are. So it's not just checking a box and providing something, is providing the right size. So that was number one. I'm going to provide the right size. I was probably undersized a little. I'm going to mount this in my pantry along with my medical kit, and I'm going to put a sign on the pantry door saying fire extinguisher in here. And a key learning for me also was, where do I place that? And if there's a fire at the stove, which I think the course says most fires happen at the stove, then I don't want to have the fire extinguisher too close. I want to have it to where when the guest accesses the fire extinguisher, they can put it out safely. The second key learning was have one upstairs as well. And I was running through this with my wife, and she said, why in the world do you want one upstairs? And, it's thinking from the perspective of the guest. If there's a fire downstairs and I'm upstairs, I want to be able to grab a fire extinguisher and head down and extinguish the fire as I'm going down versus walking into it unprepared. So there were so many key things just around fire extinguishers that I don't think most owners think about. And it really is putting yourself in the travel pattern of the guest when something bad happens. And I think, you said this, the course reiterates it. It's not if, it's when. And we've got to be prepared for that when.
Renters are on vacation. You guys have probably had this before. I'm guilty of having it. Vacation brain. It's that you can look this up. It's a real term. When people go on vacation, they tune out. And then you add something in there that a lot of people don't think about, and that's alcohol. They just did some travel studies recently and found that 75% of people in North America acknowledge that they will get intoxicated on vacation at least once, whether it's drinking too much wine, drinking too many beers, or whatever. And these people are now going to get intoxicated in your property. And then you add to that half of them say they don't usually drink at home. They only drink when they're on vacation. So these are people who aren't used to being drunk that are now in an unfamiliar location. The majority of your guests, many of you even give them the wine or the beer to get started. You leave it for them when they show up. You prime them. You say, hey, welcome to my property. Drink it up. And then they're going to make decisions in vacation brain mode about how the property is handled and their safety. And if you haven't set things up for them, you are asking for failure. It's even harder than a hotel. Hotels have rubber rooms, so to speak. They've learned this. It's harder than a cruise ship. They got security walking around. If you're intoxicated, they put you in your room and you're done for the day. No one walks to a vacation rental and go, those people are a little too intoxicated. We got to shut them down. They don't do that. You're on your own. So that makes it our job even that much more difficult in this industry.
So we talked a little bit about fire, the intoxication, the kind of the lack of maybe executive brain function when you're on vacation, and rightfully so. I mean, you deserve a vacation. You should be able to enjoy it. As I go back to these property owners who are interested, maybe they've just purchased or they're thinking about purchasing their first short-term rental. There's a program that Breezeway offers for a short-term rental safety inspector. I think that's what TC took, and I am chomping at the bit to do that certification as well, because I think there's a real need in my area to provide a level of insight. Where does that safety program, and how does that safety program or that inspector help someone who just bought a rental? When should they think about engaging with an inspector like that if they're just getting into this adventure?
Personally, I mean, I just gave this advice to somebody this morning. I think you should take the course before you even buy the home, because then you know what house or what type of property you're investing in. Boy, I want to buy this rental and I'm going to put a hot tub on that deck. I can't wait. I'm gonna make a ton of money. Well, wait a minute. That deck may not be able to support a hot tub, and until you get the right deck in place that's strong enough for a hot tub, maybe that's an investment you don't want to make. Knowing that you've got to add a $30,000 deck onto the property that will support it. So sometimes if you haven't even got one yet, definitely go through the course. But once you've gotten this, going through this course and setting yourself up as an inspector is going to help you walk through and do what I call the breakthrough inspection. It's the onboarding inspection at property management companies that you're saying, I've double checked and gone through everything. There's about 78 points on the inspection, everything from pool signage, pool depth markers, hot tub chemicals, fire extinguishers, et cetera, that are in the inspection that I believe that we should check in these rental properties. And the great thing is the course sets you up that when you do all these from the get-go, that's it for a while. Smoke alarms are good for 10 years. So it's a small investment at the beginning that then you can maintain to. Yes, you got to keep checking your smoke alarms because renters take the batteries out, but you don't have to buy new ones for 10 years. Yes, you don't have to buy another carbon monoxide alarm for 7 years. You don't need another fire extinguisher for 10. So this just gets you set up to onboard your property and have it ready to go. If you don't ever do another rental again, this will set you up.
And I think with the inspector, or this role of the inspector, me personally, I would almost connect them with the designer, right? And say, okay, you guys are working together here. Like, this is okay. The design aesthetic informs the space, but only if it meets the requirement of the safety inspector. Because I think there's some pushback, completely wrong, but there's pushback to say, I don't want a fire extinguisher hanging on the wall. I have an aesthetic going in this room. That's going to be an eyesore, because people are so proud of the design, maybe more so than, hey, here's a safe space for my guests. It's like, no. I've got a 3-story bunk bed in this room. This is amazing. You're like, oh my God.
The designers, just remember, the designers will not be with you in court helping defend you. And I meet designers all the time. I was just at a conference in Mexico City and I met 3 designers, and I just try and open their eyes. They were leaning mirrors up against the wall because it's shabby chic and looks really cool. And I said, well, you going to attach that? And they looked at me like I was crazy. I'm like, you get that a 50-pound mirror leaning against the wall falling on a child is equivalent to 27,000 pounds of force. And it was like I just hit them with a sledgehammer. They're like, what? We've never heard that. Right. And so, yeah, there's such, especially, in the Florida, Orlando markets, we got to make it look like there's a TIE fighter and Elsa and Anna having a fight over their Mickey Mouse ears inside the rental property. And everyone's going to the extreme to make it look cool. And that's what people want to rent. And then they're not realizing they've blocked the egress windows and nobody can open the blinds that darken the room so that Darth Vader can come in. And reality is, it made no sense. And the designers need to pay attention, and you sometimes have to handhold your designer through this stuff.
So with an inspector, is this a role that, if I'm a short-term rental owner, yes, I want to take the course, but is the inspector a role that you can find locally to come out to your property and do an assessment? And what's the best way to find one that maybe has gone through the Breezeway space?
Absolutely. We have a list of everyone who's gone through, and there's multiple. This is a universal course. What's so great is I have the Florida fire marshals are taking this course. I have the Texas state fire marshals going through the course. People are taking, every level of individual in this industry is taking the course. Everyone's doing something different with it, but there are professionals. We have home inspectors who've added this to their resume. So if you don't want to go through the course, but you want to have someone come to your property and hire them to take the knowledge from the course and go through, you can reach out to us and we can put you in touch with someone in your area who may want to come do that for you. It's still a growing program. We're in the thousands, not the tens of thousands yet. But the more of you that take the course, there's a business opportunity here if people want to use it.
Well, and you're going to be adding me to the inspector list here soon. I'm confident of that. But with the certification, so I get that it's certifying the individual to be able to assess the space, but if I'm a short-term rental owner, what is there a recommended way to convey that outward to guests? What's the recommendation that you have for how to, unfortunately, right now it's differentiation. I hope sooner rather than later it's going to just be par for the course that you only stay at a property that properly conveys the safety program assessment's been completed and it's a safe environment. But how does an owner convey that right now? What's the recommendation?
Yeah, so you can't rely on the OTAs or your manager to do that. The checkbox that you've marked that says I have a fire alarm, a smoke alarm, and a fire extinguisher that's listed on an OTA as an amenity, by the way, which drives me crazy. That's not good enough. You've got to show that, and there's ways to do it. So when you do these inspections, when you use the Breezeway software, you get a publicly generated report that you can then share with your guests. This is the really cool thing. We never even thought about this, Tim. Safety sells. Our intent was just to keep people out of court and not have, all these injuries. We've been just massively blown away in the past year. There was a woman in Vermont who changed the name of her listing from Luxury Mountain Retreat to Safe Mountain Retreat. Her bookings went from 77% occupancy to 96% occupancy based on the fact that people saw safe and thought, wow, that's great. We now see companies that promote their properties showing fire extinguishers in their listings and using social media to say every fifth post that they do, showing kids with life jackets or kids climbing into a safe bunk bed, seeing a lift in bookings. So the reward from this as an inspector is that you can now market these properties as safe. We have a symbol that you can put on your listing or on your website. Once you've gone through the course, it says that this property has been reviewed by someone who's gone through the Breezeway safety course. And then the coolest thing, going back to your last guest, Proper Insurance, is they're willing to give a their largest discount to people who have gone through this course and have said, I've done this inspection on my rental property. I'm certified as a Breezeway safety inspector, and this is the report, and I'd like my discount, and they're getting it.
Justin, as you think about the short-term rental industry, you mentioned at the beginning of the show that hasn't been highly regulated or at least enforced.
Yeah.
Do you foresee a day that the regulations will force from a business perspective? So, we all have to have business licenses. Is there going to be a day where we have to demonstrate safety inspections and safe environment as part of the regulation in short-term rental? Just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and it's happening fast. Florida right now has the leader. I actually just did a presentation with him last week in Las Vegas at the National Fire Protection Association annual conference. Rodney Kwiatkowski, he is Florida fire marshal, who said, I have the authority to enforce vacation rentals as commercial in my district, which is southwest of Tampa, Anna Maria Island, Bradenton area. And the national safety guys, fire marshal guys, they're all picking up on his story and going, wait a minute, we do too. It's going to happen fast. A lot of people have said, well, wait a minute, shouldn't vacation rentals have been included in the Federal Hotel Safety Act of 1990, which is why, by the way, our industry, the vacation rental industry, loses over $4 billion a year in potential bookings is because federal employees can't stay in vacation rentals. They're not considered safe by the federal government. And so people have said, well, wait a minute, isn't some law going to come down, federal law? No, it's not. It's going to be held up by the states. And it's because International Building Code and NFPA have not yet defined a short-term rental. But the second they do, every state adopts whatever NFPA or IRC, International Residential Code, says. It's going to happen overnight. One day you're going to wake up and read the news and go that the Florida State Legislature just adopted the 2024 version of International Residential Code. And by the way, International Residential Code says a vacation rental is a commercial lodging establishment that should go through safety inspections every year. So you should have done this yesterday, but we're giving you a chance to do now. The people who go through this course and get their property up, we saw this happen in, I'll just close this out with, we saw this happen in Scottsdale, Arizona last September. We saw overnight where they changed and enacted a bunch of safety regulations, And a bunch of people said, whoa, this isn't fair. We can't do this. And then we had some of our Breezeway customers there that raised their hand and went, no, this is great. We were already doing this. And they instantly went right to work and had bookings. So you do it now. It's going to be harder later when these regulations do come into play, and they're going to happen fast.
And Justin, where can our listeners find the course? Where can they find you? Where can they find the course? And then I'll do, Tim, I think my infamous summaries.
Wow, I'm feeling generous today too. So let me just tell you that the course is on the Breezeway website, and Breezeway is a software company or a tech company. So we're not a .com, we're a .io. So breezeway.io. If you go on the website, if you look underneath the products section, you'll see the safety program, and that's how you lead to the course. Or you can just type in breezeway.io/safety, and that brings you to my office, my section of the company. And so from there, you can link over to the Breezeway safety course. The course comes right now in 3 versions. There's a Spanish-speaking version that's going through a couple edits. It'll be back out again here in the next week or 2. Then there is the international version. And then we actually have a version specifically for the state of Florida. Florida has the largest number of vacation rentals in the country. We had a strong interest from people wanting us to specifically address issues in Florida. So there's a Florida version of the course. The course is $350, but for everybody here today on your podcast that wants to listen, I'll let them have the course for $100. I'm going to knock $250 off the price.
Whoa!
Yep, and that I'm gonna limit that too. That's only good through the end of July. So I'm not going to keep that out there forever. So that you got 3 weeks to sign up. You don't have to start immediately. But once you sign up, you've got to complete the course within 3 months. So $250 off, and I'll give you guys a promo code offline that you can share with any of the listeners who want to have access to that promo code.
Excellent. So I'm going to take advantage of that promo code. Done. I'll reach out to you. Awesome. That is amazing. Thank you so much. Our listeners are going to take a lot from this episode, and hopefully they're jumping on top of that and taking advantage of that, because that is so huge for them.
Tim, is it time for a recap?
It is time for a recap. I feel like we could talk for hours and hours, but I think we've got enough where this is going to be a good recap for our listeners.
Yeah, and I'm going to take a different approach with this recap. I will be the number one testimonial that this is a rigorous and comprehensive course, but as Justin said, it's 6 to 8 hours of a time commitment versus the months that an owner spends getting this set up for rental. I will promise you, all listeners, this will cause you to think differently about safety of your home and the importance of it. Everything from the size and the location of the fire extinguisher to where you put cleaning chemicals and where you shouldn't put cleaning chemicals, what you provide a guest and what you probably shouldn't provide a guest, it's going to give you a level of insight that most of us as short-term rental owners probably don't have. And as Justin said, the day is coming where states are going to highly regulate and expect you and force you to have an inspection done to show that your home is safe and has been inspected by a proper safety inspector. Today, listeners, I would highly encourage you to take the course. It's a level of education that we all need, but if you don't have time yet, reach out to an inspector on the Breezeway website to have them come out and do an inspection of your home. They'll provide you with the things that you should think and do differently and allow you to set up a safe environment for your guests. I think, Justin, you said that 83% of the incidents were around slip, trips, and falls. Many of these things can be prevented with good safety measures and with good identification inside the home. Again, it's going to cause you to think so differently about how you set your home up. It's not just about cool stuff. It's about safety first and thinking about it from that perspective. And once your home is set up as a safe environment and it's been inspected, you'll be able to put that emblem on your listing to show the guest that they are staying in a home where safety is first and it's a priority from the owner to the guest. There are so many things that I could go into that I learned in this course, but I would say that fire extinguishers, cleaning chemicals, signage inside the home to, to let the guests know about things that they might be unfamiliar with because it's an unfamiliar environment. You know, Tim, we're going to be putting night lights that are built into the outlets in the home throughout several of the houses here in the next few days. We had night lights, but as you'll learn in the course, night lights can be unplugged and removed. And then all of a sudden, you don't have the lighting. So, and if you don't think it's important today, then state regulations are coming and they're coming fast. And we want to be prepared, number one. But number two, we want to provide a safe environment. We want to get rid of some of the bad rap that short-term rentals are getting. And they've been in the news. When you take the course, you'll see all the video footage from things that have happened in short-term rentals. That's just giving the whole industry a bad name.
That's excellent. And I think that's the perfect way to end the episode. Um, that wraps just another amazing episode of Vacation Rental Blueprint, another great entry in our partner profile series. Huge thank you to Justin Ford and Breezeway for joining us today, sharing all of these invaluable insights on property safety. It's clear Breezeway's safety program is a game changer in the short-term rental industry, and we're excited to kind of see it continue to impact our industry. For more information about Breezeway, their safety program, as Justin said, visit them at www.breezeway.io/safety and reach out to us if you'd like to take advantage of that $250 off promo code. We'll get it to you. And as always, thanks to everyone for tuning in. Subscribe to Vacation Rental Blueprint. Check us out at strconsultants.co for more valuable insights and actual tips. And we look forward to talking to you all again soon. Until then, happy hosting.